The Sacred Reliquaries, a medieval shrine sleep journey. Picture yourself in the hushed treasury of a medieval cathedral, where golden reliquaries catch the soft glow of votive candles and hold within their ornate chambers the most precious remnants of sacred history. Tonight, we shall journey through the workshops and shrines of medieval Europe, following the stories of holy reliquaries that have been lost to time, elaborate containers that once housed fragments of saints' bones, pieces of the true cross, and other sacred remnants that pilgrims traveled thousands of miles to venerate. Some were hidden during invasions and never recovered. Others were dismantled when their monasteries fell to ruin. Still others simply vanished into the mists of history, leaving behind only fading records of the miraculous healings and spiritual experiences they once facilitated. In this age of faith and pilgrimage, when the physical remains of holy men and women were believed to carry divine power that could heal the sick, protect communities from harm, and provide direct connection between earthly existence and heavenly glory, each reliquary was far more than a simple container. It was a sacred vessel designed to honor the saint whose remains it protected, while making those precious relics accessible to the faithful who sought their intercession. Master craftsmen labored for years to create reliquaries that would be worthy of their holy contents, using the finest gold, silver, and precious stones available while incorporating artistic elements that told the stories of the saints whose bones lay within. Let us now drift through their quiet histories, as gentle as the whisper of prayers offered before golden shrines, as peaceful as the soft gleam of sacred metal reflecting the light of countless candles lit by hopeful pilgrims. Imagine yourself standing in the Abbey Church of Saint Denis, just outside Paris, in the year 1144, where Abbot Suger has commissioned the most magnificent reliquary ever created to house the remains of Saint Denis, the patron saint of France. Master Godefroy of Huy, the greatest goldsmith of his generation, has labored for 3 years to create this masterpiece of sacred art, a golden shrine that stands taller than a man and incorporates artistic techniques that push the boundaries of what medieval metalwork can achieve. The reliquary's base depicts scenes from the life of Saint Denis in relief panels so detailed that each tiny figure seems to possess individual personality and spiritual presence, while precious stones from across the known world, sapphires from Ceylon, emeralds from Egypt, pearls from the shores of Britain, are set into golden settings that seem to glow with their own inner light. The central chamber, designed to hold the saint's skull and major bones, is fashioned from pure gold and decorated with enamel work that creates images of such beauty that observers often claim to see the figures moving in the candlelight. Master Godefroy has incorporated a revolutionary innovation, crystal panels that allow pilgrims to see the sacred relics within while protecting them from damage, creating a visual connection between the faithful and the saint that had never before been possible in medieval reliquary design. The shrine's completion becomes a celebration that draws nobles and commoners from throughout Europe, with King Louis VII himself serving as one of the bearers who processed the saints' remains into their new golden home. Brother Philippe, who serves as the abbey's custodian of relics, documents the extraordinary events that begin occurring almost immediately after the reliquary is installed. Pilgrims report healings that surpass anything previously witnessed at Saint Denis, while the golden shrine itself seems to emanate a supernatural warmth that can be felt by anyone who approaches with genuine faith. The reliquary becomes so famous that other royal houses throughout Europe commission similar shrines for their own patron saints, while Master Godefroy's techniques influence goldsmith workshops from England to Hungary. But the very magnificence that makes the Saint Denis reliquary so spiritually powerful also makes it vulnerable to the political upheavals that periodically sweep through medieval France. During the chaos of the Third Crusade, when royal treasuries are emptied to fund military expeditions to the Holy Land, pressure mounts to melt down gold and religious artifacts to provide coin for soldiers and supplies. Brother Philippe's chronicle, maintained until his death in 1187, documents his growing anxiety about protecting the reliquary from secular authorities who see it as a source of gold rather than a sacred vessel. The shrine disappears during the night of October 13, 1187, with Brother Philippe's final entry explaining that he has hidden the reliquary in a location known only to God, believing that such a sacred vessel should wait in concealment until France has leaders worthy of its spiritual power. Despite centuries of searching by subsequent generations of monks and royal investigators, the golden reliquary of St. Denis has never been found, though pilgrims to the abbey sometimes report seeing golden light emanating from behind the high altar during the most solemn moments of the liturgy. The candlelight flickers against ancient stone as we drift to the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, where the silver reliquary of St. James the Greater housed the remains of the apostle whose shrine drew pilgrims from across Europe along the famous Camino de Santiago. Created in 1135 by Master Matteo, the architect and sculptor responsible for the cathedral's magnificent portico of glory, this reliquary represented a perfect synthesis of architectural grandeur and spiritual intimacy, designed to provide a focal point for the thousands of pilgrims who completed the arduous journey to Compostela each year. The reliquary's form echoes the cathedral itself, with miniature towers, flying buttresses, and rose windows, all rendered in silver and decorated with scenes from the apostle's life and martyrdom. Brother Santiago, who served as the cathedral's master of pilgrims for 40 years, maintained detailed records of the miraculous healings and spiritual experiences that pilgrims reported after praying before the silver shrine. His chronicles describe cases of paralyzed pilgrims walking away from the reliquary, blind travelers regaining their sight after touching its silver surface, and countless instances of spiritual healing that seem to address not just physical ailments, but also the psychological and emotional wounds that had driven people to undertake such difficult pilgrimages. The reliquary's design incorporates elements that specifically address the needs of exhausted pilgrims: silver handles that allow the shrine to be carried in procession, crystal viewing panels positioned at heights accessible to people in wheelchairs or on crutches, and small silver tokens that pilgrims could touch and take away as blessed mementos of their journey to Compostela. Brother Santiago's writings reveal his deep understanding of how physical design could facilitate spiritual experience, with every element of the reliquary carefully planned to help weary travelers feel that their long journey had brought them into direct contact with apostolic power. The silver shrine becomes so central to the Compostela pilgrimage experience that its image appears on pilgrim badges, manuscript illustrations, and church decorations throughout Europe, while poems and songs celebrating the reliquary spread the fame of Santiago de Compostela to regions that had never heard of the Spanish shrine. But the very success of the Compostela pilgrimage eventually creates pressures that threaten the reliquary's survival. The enormous numbers of pilgrims who visit the cathedral each year create practical challenges that strain the cathedral's resources, while the wealth the pilgrimage brings to Compostela attracts unwanted attention from secular authorities who see the shrine as a source of taxation revenue rather than spiritual blessing. Brother Santiago's final journal entry, written in 1198, describes his decision to remove the silver reliquary from public display, believing that the saint's remains would be better protected in a hidden location where they could continue their healing work without being compromised by commercial and political pressures. The reliquary disappears from Santiago Cathedral on the Feast of St. James in 1199, with only a note left by Brother Santiago explaining that the apostle has called his relics to a place of greater safety. Despite extensive searches and official investigations, the silver shrine of St. James has never been recovered, though pilgrims completing the Camino de Santiago sometimes report seeing silver light along the final stages of their journey, as if the apostle continues to guide travelers even though his earthly reliquary has vanished from human sight. Feel your breathing slow as we wander to the Cathedral of Canterbury, where the golden reliquary of St. Thomas Becket became one of the most famous pilgrimage destinations in medieval Europe following the Archbishop's martyrdom in 1170. Master William of Sens, the French architect brought to Canterbury to rebuild the cathedral after a devastating fire, collaborated with the goldsmith Master Anquetil to create a reliquary that would be worthy of England's most famous martyr, while incorporating architectural innovations that would influence church design throughout the British Isles. The reliquary's design reflects the political and spiritual significance of Thomas Becket's martyrdom, with golden panels depicting not just the Archbishop's life and death, but also the broader struggle between church and state that his murder represented. The shrine's base shows scenes from Thomas's early career as Chancellor to King Henry II, while the central section depicts his transformation from worldly courtier to spiritual leader, culminating in golden panels that portray his final confrontation with the four knights who murdered him in Canterbury Cathedral. Brother Benedict, who served as keeper of St. Thomas's shrine for 30 years, documented the extraordinary impact that the reliquary had on pilgrims who traveled to Canterbury from throughout Europe and beyond. His chronicles describe not just physical healings, but also spiritual transformations that seemed to occur when pilgrims found themselves face to face with the golden shrine that contained the remains of a man who had chosen death rather than compromise his spiritual principles. The reliquary's design incorporates practical elements that address the needs of the thousands of pilgrims who visit Canterbury each year. Multiple viewing points that allow large crowds to approach the shrine simultaneously, silver handles that enable the reliquary to be carried in procession on major feast days, and small crystal panels that contain secondary relics that pilgrims can touch without disturbing the main shrine. Brother Benedict's writings reveal his understanding that the reliquary serves not just as a container for sacred bones, but as a focal point for the spiritual energy generated by countless acts of faith, prayer, and pilgrimage that have been offered in its presence. The golden shrine becomes so associated with miraculous healing that it attracts pilgrims from as far away as Norway and Hungary, while the income generated by offerings made at the shrine helps fund Canterbury Cathedral's extensive building projects and charitable works. But the very fame that makes St. Thomas's reliquary so spiritually powerful also makes it vulnerable to the religious and political changes that transform English society in the early modern period. The Protestant Reformation brings new attitudes towards saint veneration that question whether reliquaries serve authentic Christian purposes or represent dangerous remnants of Catholic superstition. Brother Benedict's final chronicle entry, written in 1538, describes his heartbreak at seeing commissioners from King Henry VIII dismantling the golden shrine that had been his life's work to maintain and protect. The reliquary of St. Thomas Becket is officially destroyed in 1538, its gold melted down to fill royal coffers, but Brother Benedict's secret writings reveal that he managed to preserve some portions of the shrine in hidden locations throughout Canterbury Cathedral. Despite centuries of searching by antiquarians and historians, these hidden fragments of England's most famous reliquary have never been found, though visitors to Canterbury sometimes report seeing golden reflections in the cathedral's ancient stonework during moments of particular spiritual intensity. The night deepens around us like a protective embrace as we drift to the monastery of Monte Cassino, where the crystal reliquary of St. Benedict housed the remains of the father of Western monasticism in a shrine that perfectly embodied the Benedictine principles of simplicity, beauty, and spiritual functionality. Created in 1071 by Master Desiderius, who later became Pope Victor III, This reliquary represented a revolutionary approach to sacred art that emphasized transparency and accessibility rather than the golden magnificence that characterized most medieval shrines. The reliquary's crystal panels, supported by silver frames decorated with scenes from St. Benedict's life, allowed pilgrims to see the saint's remains clearly while creating optical effects that seemed to make the bones glow with their own inner light. Brother Placid, who served as Monte Cassino's archivist for 50 years, documented the unique spiritual atmosphere that the crystal reliquary created within the monastery's church. His writings describe how the shrine's transparency seemed to eliminate the barrier between the living and the dead, allowing monks and pilgrims to feel that they were praying directly with Saint Benedict rather than simply asking for his intercession. The reliquary's design reflects Benedictine values in every detail. The crystal panels emphasize honesty and openness. The silver framework demonstrates appropriate beauty without excessive luxury, and the shrine's proportions create a sense of human scale that makes the saint seem approachable rather than remote. Brother Placid's chronicles reveal that the crystal reliquary influenced not just the spiritual life of Monte Cassino, but also the artistic development of Benedictine monasteries throughout Europe, with many communities commissioning similar transparent shrines for their own patron saints. The monastery's workshop, inspired by the success of St. Benedict's reliquary, becomes a center for crystal working that develops techniques for creating optical effects that enhance rather than distract from prayer and contemplation. The shrine's fame spreads beyond monastic circles to influence secular art and architecture, with nobles and bishops commissioning crystal windows and decorative elements that apply Benedictine principles of transparency to non-religious contexts. But the very innovation that makes the crystal reliquary so spiritually effective also makes it vulnerable to changing artistic fashions that favor more conventional approaches to sacred art. The Byzantine influence that grows stronger in medieval Italy during the 12th century brings preference for golden icons and mosaic decorations that seem more traditionally religious than the experimental transparency of the Benedict shrine. Brother Placid's final journal entry, written in 1142, expresses his fear that future generations of monks will not understand the spiritual principles that guided the reliquary's creation, leading them to replace the crystal shrine with something more conventionally impressive. The reliquary of Saint Benedict disappears from Monte Cassino during the reconstruction projects of the 13th century, with monastic records suggesting that it was moved to a location where its unique spiritual qualities could be better preserved. Despite searches by scholars and antiquarians, the crystal shrine has never been recovered, though Benedictine monasteries throughout the world sometimes report moments of unusual spiritual clarity that seem to echo the transparency that once characterized the father of monasticism's reliquary. Feel yourself sinking deeper into peaceful rest as we visit the Cathedral of Chartres, where the reliquary of the Virgin's Veil became the focal point for one of medieval Europe's most important Marian pilgrimage sites. The shrine, created in 1194 following the cathedral's reconstruction after a devastating fire, housed the sacred tunic that tradition claimed Mary wore during the Annunciation, making it one of the most precious Marian relics in the Christian world. Master Guillaume de Sens, working with a team of goldsmiths, glass workers, and gem cutters, created a reliquary that incorporated the revolutionary Gothic aesthetic being developed at Chartres while honoring the ancient traditions surrounding Marian veneration. The reliquary's design reflects the theological sophistication that characterized Gothic spirituality, with crystal panels arranged to create optical effects that seem to make the sacred veil glow with celestial light, while gold framework decorated with scenes from Mary's life provides narrative context that helps pilgrims understand the relic's significance. Brother Robert, who served as Chartres' keeper of Marian relics for 40 years, documented the extraordinary devotion that the reliquary inspired among pilgrims who traveled to Chartres from throughout Christendom. His chronicles describe pregnant women who experienced safe deliveries after praying before the shrine, sterile couples who conceived children following visits to the reliquary, and countless instances of healing that seem to reflect Mary's particular concern for women's health and family welfare. The reliquary's design incorporates elements that specifically address the needs of female pilgrims, low viewing panels that allow pregnant women to approach comfortably, silver touching points that enable direct contact with the shrine's blessed surfaces, and crystal lenses that magnify the sacred veil so that even pilgrims standing at the back of large crowds can see the precious relic clearly. Brother Robert's writings reveal his understanding that Marian devotion required different architectural and artistic approaches than the veneration of male saints, with every element of the reliquary designed to create an atmosphere of maternal comfort and feminine spiritual power. The shrine becomes so central to Chartres' identity that its image appears in the cathedral's stained glass windows, while poems and hymns celebrating the reliquary spread Marian devotion to regions throughout Europe that had previously focused primarily on Christ and the apostles. But the very success of the Chartres pilgrimage eventually creates theological controversies that threaten the reliquary's survival. Protestant reformers question whether devotion to Marian relics represents authentic Christian piety or dangerous idolatry that distracts from proper worship of Christ, while Catholic counter-reformers worry that popular Marian devotion sometimes incorporates elements that seem more pagan than Christian. Brother Robert's final journal entry, written in 1562, describes his decision to hide the reliquary during the religious wars that are devastating France, believing that such a precious relic should be protected from both Protestant iconoclasts and Catholic reformers who might not understand its true spiritual significance. The reliquary of the Virgin's Veil disappears from Chartres Cathedral during the night of August 15, 1562, the Feast of the Assumption, with only a note left by Brother Robert explaining that Mary has called her relic to a place of safety where it can continue to provide maternal comfort to those who need her intercession. Despite extensive searches by church authorities and royal investigators, the Marian reliquary has never been found, though women throughout the world continue to report experiences of maternal comfort and healing that seem to echo the spiritual power that once emanated from the crystal shrine at Chartres. The hours pass like whispered prayers as we drift to the Abbey of Cluny, where the silver reliquary of St. Hugh contained the heart of the great abbot, whose reforms transformed monastic life throughout medieval Europe. Created in 1109, shortly after Hugh's canonization, this reliquary embodied the Cluniac ideal of liturgical beauty that made prayer itself a form of art while maintaining the spiritual focus that gave Benedictine monasticism its distinctive character. Master Peter the Venerable, who succeeded Hugh as abbot of Cluny, personally supervised the reliquary's creation, working with silversmiths to develop techniques that would create a shrine worthy of the saint whose vision had made Cluny the center of monastic reform. The reliquary's design reflects Hugh's particular gifts as a spiritual leader. Its silver panels depict not just his personal sanctity, but also his role in reforming monastic practices throughout Europe, while crystal windows allow viewers to see the saint's preserved heart beating with a rhythm that seems to echo the cosmic pulse of divine love. Brother Maurice, who served as Hugh's secretary during the saint's lifetime and later became keeper of his reliquary, documented the continuation of Hugh's reforming influence through the miraculous power of his preserved heart. His chronicles describe how abbots and priors from throughout Europe would come to pray before the silver shrine when facing difficult decisions about monastic reform, often reporting that they received clear guidance that seemed to come directly from Hugh's continuing spiritual presence. The reliquary becomes a center for ongoing monastic education, with the abbey's school using the shrine as a focal point for teaching the principles of Reformed Benedictine life that Hewitt developed during his 60 years as Cluny's abbot. Brother Maurice's writings reveal how the reliquary serves not just as a devotional object, but as a continuing source of the spiritual wisdom that had made Hugh one of medieval Europe's most influential religious leaders. The silver shrine influences the design of similar reliquaries throughout the Cluniac network, while Hugh's continuing presence through his reliquary helps maintain the unity and spiritual focus that characterized Benedictine communities that followed Cluny's reforms. But the very success of Cluniac monasticism eventually creates institutional pressures that threaten the spiritual authenticity that Hugh's reliquary represents. The wealth and political influence that reformed monasteries accumulate over time leads to compromises with secular power that seem to contradict the spiritual purity that Hugh had sought to restore to Benedictine life. Brother Maurice's final journal entry, written in 1156, describes his growing concern that Cluny's institutional success is undermining the spiritual principles that Hugh's reforms had established, leading him to hide the saint's reliquary in a location where its spiritual power can continue to influence monastic life without being compromised by political and economic pressures. The silver reliquary of St. Hugh disappears from Cluny during the night of April 29, 1157, the anniversary of Hugh's death, with Brother Maurice's note explaining that the saint's heart has been entrusted to guardians who will preserve its reforming power for future generations of monks who may rediscover the authentic Benedictine spirit. Despite searches by Cluniac authorities throughout Europe, the reliquary has never been found, though Benedictine communities worldwide sometimes experience moments of spiritual renewal that seem to echo the reforming energy that once emanated from Hugh's silver shrine. As the abbey bells ring out across the medieval landscape, calling faithful communities to their final prayers of the day, we encounter the ultimate destination of our pilgrimage, the legendary Chapel of Sacred Vessels, where all lost reliquaries ultimately find their eternal home. Here, in chambers that transcend the limitations of earthly materials, the accumulated sanctity of centuries creates an atmosphere where crystal perpetually shines with divine light, where silver and gold reflect not just candle flame, but the glory of the saints whose remains they once protected, and where every reliquary that has ever served the purposes of authentic devotion continues its sacred function in the timeless liturgy that encompasses all genuine worship throughout human history. The vanished reliquaries we have encountered in our journey through medieval Europe are represented here not as lost treasures, but as vessels that have transcended their earthly limitations to join the heavenly sanctuary where saint, sinner, relic, and worshiper contained merge in the perfect unity that authentic spiritual experience ultimately seeks. And as the abbey bells ring out across both time and eternity, calling all seekers to the universal chapel that exists beyond the boundaries of any particular religious tradition, we understand that every reliquary that ever held sacred remains, every shrine that ever facilitated authentic spiritual experience, every vessel that ever served to make the invisible presence of holiness visible to human eyes participates in humanity's ongoing search for connection with the divine mystery that transcends all earthly categories while remaining intimately present in every moment of genuine spiritual openness. The lost reliquaries we have encountered tonight represent not endings but transformations, their sacred purpose preserved in the eternal sanctuary, where all authentic devotion finds its ultimate fulfillment. Rest now, dear listener, knowing that every moment of reverence you have ever experienced, every time you have felt the presence of something greater than yourself, every instant when the boundary between earthly existence and divine reality has seemed to dissolve, connects you to the eternal reliquary that holds all sacred experience in its infinite embrace. Sleep now, and let your dreams be filled with the gentle glow of crystal and precious metal reflecting divine light, the soft whisper of prayers offered before golden shrines, the peaceful presence of saints whose earthly remains have become doorways to heavenly reality. In your dreams, you may find that every lost reliquary eventually finds its way to worthy hands. Every sacred vessel continues to serve its holy purpose. Every shrine that time has claimed becomes part of the eternal sanctuary where all spiritual seeking finds its home. The medieval night embraces you now, complete and eternal, where every lost reliquary becomes a blessing, every vanished shrine becomes a prayer, every sacred vessel that time has claimed becomes part of the infinite sanctuary that holds all human longing for the divine, offering eternal healing to every soul that approaches with humble heart and genuine faith in the mystery that transcends all understanding while remaining closer to us than our own breathing. The illuminated manuscripts, a medieval scriptorium. Picture yourself in the quiet scriptorium of a medieval monastery, where illuminated manuscripts glow softly in the gentle light of tall windows, and the careful work of scribes and artists creates some of the most beautiful books the world has ever known. Tonight, we shall journey through the workshops and libraries of medieval Europe, following the stories of precious illuminated manuscripts that have been lost to time, exquisite books adorned with gold leaf and brilliant colors that once preserved the wisdom of ages, but now exist only in memory and legend. Some were carefully hidden when their monasteries closed and never rediscovered. Others were scattered when private libraries were sold. Still others simply faded away over the centuries, leaving behind only whispered tales of their extraordinary beauty and the peaceful devotion of those who created them. In this age of patient craftsmanship and quiet scholarship, when books were treasured beyond price and the creation of a single manuscript could take years of gentle labor, each illuminated book was far more than text on parchment. It was a work of art that combined the highest skills of scribes, painters, and goldworkers while preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost to future generations. Master illuminators spent months planning the decorative schemes that would transform plain text into visual poetry, using the finest pigments available: ultramarine blue made from lapis lazuli, brilliant reds from cinnabar, pure gold that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Let us now drift through their quiet stories, as gentle as the scratch of quill on parchment, as peaceful as the soft glow of gold leaf catching morning sunlight through tall scriptorium windows. Imagine yourself standing in the Abbey of Saint Martin in Tours during the year 834, where the Scriptorium produces the most beautiful Bibles in Carolingian Europe under the direction of Master Alcuin, Charlemagne's beloved scholar and teacher. Brother Turpin, the Abbey's master illuminator, has spent 5 years creating what will become known as the Golden Bible of Tours, a manuscript so beautiful that it seems to glow with divine light itself. Each page combines perfectly formed letters, written in the clearest Caroline minuscule script, with illuminated capitals that tell entire stories in miniature, while full-page illustrations render biblical scenes with such delicate beauty that observers often feel transported directly into the sacred narratives. Brother Turpin's workshop includes a dozen assistants, each specializing in different aspects of manuscript creation. Brother Martin prepares the finest vellum from lambskins so carefully selected and treated that the parchment feels like silk. Brother Peter mixes pigments according to ancient recipes that create colors of unprecedented brilliance, while Brother Paul applies gold leaf with such skill that the metallic highlights seem to breathe with life. The scriptorium's daily routine follows the monastic hours, with periods of intensive work alternating with moments of prayer and contemplation that keep the illuminators connected to the spiritual purpose of their artistic labor. Brother Turpin believes that the spiritual state of the artist influences the final appearance of the manuscript, requiring each illuminator to maintain perfect inner peace while working on the most sacred texts. The Golden Bible's completion becomes a celebration that draws scholars from throughout Charlemagne's empire, with the emperor himself traveling to Tours to examine this masterpiece of Carolingian art. The manuscript's fame spreads throughout Europe as copies of individual pages circulate among monasteries seeking to learn the Tours techniques, while the original Bible becomes the model for royal and imperial scriptoria throughout the Frankish realm. Brother Turpin's teaching methods, documented in his Manual for Illuminators, emphasize the integration of spiritual practice with artistic technique, creating an approach to manuscript creation that influences book production throughout medieval Europe. But as the Carolingian Empire fragments and monastery life becomes less stable, the specialized knowledge required for creating such magnificent manuscripts gradually becomes more difficult to maintain. Brother Turpin's final journal entry, written in 875, expresses his concern that future generations may not have the resources or patience necessary for such elaborate manuscript creation, leading him to hide the Golden Bible in a specially constructed chamber where it can wait for an age that will appreciate such careful artistry. The manuscript disappears from Tours during the Viking raids of 876, with monastery records suggesting that Brother Turpin's hiding place was so cleverly designed that the precious Bible remained safe even when the abbey itself was temporarily abandoned. Despite searches by scholars and antiquarians over the centuries, the Golden Bible of Tours has never been found, though illuminators throughout the world sometimes report moments of artistic inspiration that seem to echo the spiritual techniques that Brother Turpin developed in his quiet scriptorium. The soft light of afternoon filters through tall windows as we drift to the monastery of Reichenau, on an island in Lake Constance, where the Scriptorium of the Ottonian Renaissance created some of the most sophisticated, illuminated manuscripts in medieval Germany. Master Herbert, who served as the abbey's head illuminator during the reign of Emperor Otto III, developed revolutionary techniques for combining Byzantine artistic influences with Germanic decorative traditions, creating a unique style that made Reichenau manuscripts instantly recognizable throughout the Holy Roman Empire. Brother Conrad, who worked under Master Herbert's direction for 20 years, specialized in creating the intricate interlaced patterns that frame the manuscript pages while incorporating symbolic elements that deepen the spiritual meaning of the texts they decorate. His masterwork, the Codex Aureus of Reichenau, required 3 years to complete and represents the pinnacle of Ottonian manuscript art, with each page designed to guide readers through multiple levels of meaning while providing visual beauty that makes the act of reading itself a form of prayer. The scriptorium's techniques for applying gold leaf create optical effects that seem to make the letters glow from within, while the monastery's library preserves Master Herobert's detailed notes on color mixing that revealed trade connections extending from Britain to Constantinople. Brother Conrad's journal documents the peaceful satisfaction he found in spending entire days working on single illuminated letters, describing the meditative quality of repetitive decorative work that allowed his mind to rest, while his hands continued their careful artistic labor. The Reichenau Scriptorium becomes a center for training illuminators who carry the monastery's techniques to scriptoria throughout Germany and neighboring regions, while emperors and nobles compete to commission manuscripts from the abbey's master artists. The island location provides perfect conditions for manuscript creation, isolation from political distractions, pure air that helps preserve delicate pigments, and steady light reflected from the lake that illuminators prefer for detailed work. But as political conditions change and imperial patronage shifts to other centers, the Reichenau Scriptorium gradually loses the resources necessary to maintain its elaborate manuscript production. Brother Conrad's final diary entry, written in 1048, describes his decision to preserve the monastery's most precious manuscripts by moving them to a secret library chamber that he has constructed in a remote part of the island, believing that future scholars will eventually rediscover these treasures when the world again values such patient artistry. The Codex Aureus and dozens of other Reichenau masterpieces disappeared during the monastery's decline in the 11th century, with Brother Conrad's cryptic notes providing the only clues to their location. Despite extensive archaeological investigations of Reichenau Island, the hidden manuscript collection has never been found, though visitors to the island sometimes report seeing golden reflections in the lake waters during sunset, as if the buried treasures continued to glow with the light that Master Heribert and Brother Conrad worked so carefully to capture in their illuminated pages. Feel your breathing slow as we wander to the Cathedral School of Reims, where Archbishop Hincmar established one of Europe's most important scriptoria for creating liturgical manuscripts that would standardize religious practices throughout the Carolingian Church. Master Ebo, the school's chief illuminator, developed techniques for creating manuscripts that combine practical utility with extraordinary beauty, ensuring that priests throughout the empire would have access to service books that made the celebration of Mass both spiritually meaningful and visually inspiring. Sister Bertha, one of the few female illuminators whose work survives in historical records, specialized in creating delicate marginal decorations that complemented the main text while adding layers of visual meaning that enhanced readers' understanding of liturgical symbolism. Her masterwork, The Sacramentary of Reims, incorporates decorative elements drawn from local folk traditions alongside classical and Byzantine artistic influences, creating a uniquely Frankish approach to manuscript illumination that reflects the cultural synthesis occurring throughout Charlemagne's empire. The Reims Scriptorium's daily schedule balances artistic work with liturgical obligations, with illuminators participating in the cathedral's elaborate daily services while spending their working hours creating manuscripts that will be used in similar services throughout the Carolingian realm. Sister Bertha's technique notes, preserved in the cathedral's archives, reveal her understanding that liturgical manuscripts must serve both aesthetic and practical purposes, requiring artistic choices that enhance rather than distract from the spiritual functions that the books will serve. The scriptorium's location within the cathedral complex provides illuminators with direct access to the liturgical life that their manuscripts support, while the school's scholarly resources ensure that artistic choices reflect accurate theological understanding. Master Ebo's teaching methods emphasize the spiritual dimensions of manuscript creation, requiring students to understand the religious significance of texts before beginning their artistic work, while Sister Bertha's contributions demonstrate that female artists could achieve technical excellence equal to their male colleagues when given appropriate opportunities. The Reims manuscripts become models for liturgical book production throughout the empire, while the Scriptorium's training programs produce illuminators who establish similar workshops in cathedral schools throughout France and Germany. But as ecclesiastical politics become more complex and cathedral resources are redirected toward building projects and political alliances, the specialized knowledge and patient working conditions necessary for elaborate manuscript creation become more difficult to maintain. Sister Bertha's final letter, written to a former student in 887, expresses her decision to preserve the scriptorium's most precious manuscripts by entrusting them to a network of female religious communities that she believes will better understand the spiritual values that motivated their creation. The Sacramentary of Reims and related manuscripts disappear from the cathedral during the political upheavals of the late 9th century, with Sister Bertha's correspondence providing tantalizing hints about their location among communities of religious women throughout northern France. Despite investigations by church historians and art scholars, the Reims liturgical collection has never been recovered, though cathedral musicians sometimes report that their most inspired performances seem to echo the visual beauty that once decorated the manuscripts they no longer possess. The night deepens around us like a protective embrace as we drift to the Abbey of Cluny, where the Scriptorium produced devotional manuscripts that embodied the Cluniac reform movement's emphasis on liturgical beauty and spiritual depth. Brother Odilo, who served as both abbot and master illuminator during Cluny's golden age, developed manuscript techniques that transformed prayer books into vehicles for mystical experience, using artistic elements that guided readers toward deeper contemplative states, while preserving the texts that formed the foundation of Reformed Benedictine spirituality. The Scriptorium's masterpiece, the Cluniac Antiphonary, required a team of 12 illuminators working under Brother Odilo's direction for 7 years, creating a manuscript that contains over 400 illuminated pages designed to accompany the elaborate musical offices that characterize Cluniac worship. Each page combines perfectly executed musical notation with decorative elements that reflect the emotional and spiritual content of specific chants, while full-page illustrations provide visual focal points for meditation during the longest services. Brother Benedict, who specialized in creating the intricate vine-scrolled borders that frame each page, documented the meditative techniques that illuminators use to maintain spiritual focus during months of repetitive decorative work. His journal describes the peaceful satisfaction of spending entire days creating delicate patterns that would help future generations of monks achieve deeper prayer, while his artistic innovations influenced manuscript decoration throughout the Cluniac network of monasteries. The scriptorium's techniques for combining text and image create manuscripts that function as complete artistic environments, with every visual element carefully planned to enhance the spiritual atmosphere necessary for contemplative prayer. Brother Odilo's teaching methods emphasize the integration of artistic technique with monastic spirituality, requiring illuminators to understand the mystical dimensions of the texts they decorate while maintaining the technical excellence that makes Cluniac manuscripts recognizable throughout Europe. The monastery's library preserves detailed records of pigment recipes and artistic techniques that reveal trade connections extending throughout the Mediterranean world, while copying programs ensure that Cluniac artistic innovations spread to affiliated monasteries throughout the Reform movement. But as the Cluniac network grows larger and more institutionalized, the intimate spiritual atmosphere that made the original scriptorium so productive becomes more difficult to maintain in communities focused on administrative efficiency rather than contemplative depth. Brother Benedict's final journal entry, written in 1137, describes his concern that future generations of Cluniac monks may value institutional success more than the spiritual authenticity that inspired the movement's artistic achievements, leading him to preserve the most precious manuscripts in a hidden collection that will await rediscovery by monks who understand their true spiritual purpose. The Cluniac Antiphonary and dozens of related manuscripts disappear from the abbey during the administrative reorganizations of the 12th century, with Brother Benedict's cryptic notes suggesting that they remain hidden somewhere within the extensive Cluniac monastery complex. Despite searches by scholars interested in Cluniac art and spirituality, the hidden manuscript collection has never been found, though Benedictine communities worldwide sometimes experience moments of liturgical inspiration that seem to echo the visual beauty that once accompanied their ancestors' prayer. Feel yourself sinking deeper into peaceful rest as we visit the convent of Helfta in Saxony, where a community of learned nuns created some of medieval Europe's most sophisticated mystical manuscripts under the direction of the great mystic Mechthild of Hackeborn. Sister Gertrude, who served as the convent's master illuminator, developed artistic techniques specifically designed to express women's mystical experiences, creating visual languages that could communicate spiritual insights that traditional theological vocabulary seemed unable to capture adequately. The Scriptorium's masterwork, the Liber Specialis Gratiae, combines Mechthild's mystical visions with Sister Gertrude's revolutionary artistic interpretations, creating a manuscript that serves both as spiritual autobiography and artistic innovation. Each page uses color, form, and symbolic imagery to guide readers through the stages of mystical experience that Mechthild documented in her written accounts, while marginal decorations provide additional layers of visual meaning that complement and expand the main text. Sister Adelheid, who specialized in creating the delicate floral borders that frame each page, documented the community's understanding that women's spiritual experiences required different artistic approaches than the manuscripts created in male monastic scriptoria. Her technique notes reveal sophisticated understanding of color psychology and symbolic meaning, while her artistic innovations demonstrate that female illuminators developed distinctively feminine approaches to manuscript decoration when given freedom to explore their own creative visions. The Helfta Scriptorium becomes a center for training female illuminators who carry the convent's techniques to religious communities throughout the German-speaking regions, while the manuscripts produced their influence women's mystical writing throughout medieval Europe. The convent's library preserves correspondence with other learned women that reveals extensive networks of intellectual exchange among female religious communities, while copying programs ensure that mystical texts written by women reach audiences that might otherwise never encounter feminine spiritual perspectives. Sister Gertrude's teaching methods emphasize the integration of artistic expression with mystical experience, requiring student illuminators to understand the spiritual states they are attempting to visualize while developing technical skills necessary for sophisticated manuscript production. But as ecclesiastical authorities become more suspicious of independent women's religious communities and mystical experiences that seem to bypass traditional clerical authority, the freedom that made Helfta's artistic innovations possible becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. Sister Adelheid's final letter, written to a former student in 1298, describes her decision to preserve the convent's most precious manuscripts by distributing them among women's religious communities that she believes will continue to value the feminine spiritual insights that motivated their creation. The Liber Specialis Gratiae and related mystical manuscripts disappear from Helfta during the convent's decline in the early 14th century, with Sister Adelheid's correspondence suggesting that they were entrusted to networks of religious women throughout Northern Europe. Despite investigations by scholars interested in women's mystical writing and medieval feminine spirituality, the Helfta manuscript collection has never been recovered, though women throughout the world continue to report mystical experiences that seem to echo the visual and spiritual beauty that Sister Gertrude and Sister Adelheid worked so carefully to preserve in their illuminated pages. The hours pass like gentle prayers as we drift to the monastery of San Milan de la Cogolla in northern Spain, where the Scriptorium created the first manuscripts written in vernacular Spanish while maintaining the highest standards of artistic excellence that characterize the best Latin scriptoria. Brother Gonzalo, who served as the monastery's master illuminator during the 11th century, developed techniques for adapting traditional manuscript decoration to accommodate the rhythms and cultural references of emerging Romance languages, creating visual vocabularies that reflected both classical learning and local folk traditions. The scriptorium's most famous creation, the Glossus Emilianensis, represents one of the earliest attempts to create illuminated manuscripts in vernacular Spanish, with Brother Gonzalo's artistic interpretations providing visual bridges between Latin scholarly traditions and the cultural expressions of medieval Iberian communities. Each page demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how different languages require different artistic approaches, while decorative elements incorporate symbolic references that would be meaningful to Spanish-speaking audiences without abandoning the international artistic standards that made the monastery's manuscripts valuable throughout Christian Europe. Sister Teresa, who worked as one of the few female collaborators in the predominantly male scriptorium, specialized in creating miniature portraits that captured the distinctive physiognomy and cultural characteristics of Iberian saints and historical figures. Her artistic innovations demonstrate that manuscript illumination could serve not just religious purposes, but also cultural preservation, maintaining visual records of local traditions that might otherwise be lost as communities became more integrated into broader European cultural patterns. The San Milan Scriptorium becomes a center for developing artistic techniques that later influenced manuscript production throughout the Spanish kingdoms, while the monastery's bilingual manuscripts serve as models for communities seeking to preserve vernacular literature within traditional Latin scholarly frameworks. Brother Gonzalo's teaching methods emphasize cultural sensitivity alongside technical excellence, requiring student illuminators to understand local customs and linguistic patterns while maintaining the artistic standards that allow their work to communicate effectively with international audiences. The monastery's location along the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela provides illuminators with exposure to cultural influences from throughout Europe, while the community's commitment to preserving local traditions ensures that international artistic techniques serve regional cultural preservation rather than replacing indigenous expressions. But as political conditions in medieval Spain become more complex and resources are redirected toward military activities, the patient scholarly work necessary for creating bilingual illuminated manuscripts becomes increasingly difficult to sustain. Sister Teresa's final journal entry, written in 1089, describes her decision to preserve the scriptorium's most precious vernacular manuscripts by entrusting them to communities of religious women who she believes will better understand their cultural significance and linguistic innovations. The glosses Emilianenses and related bilingual manuscripts disappear from San Mian during the political upheavals of the late 11th century, with Sister Teresa's notes suggesting that they were distributed among women's religious communities throughout northern Spain. Despite searches by scholars interested in early Romance literature and Spanish cultural history, the San Milan vernacular collection has never been found, though speakers of Romance languages throughout the world sometimes experience moments of linguistic beauty that seem to echo the cultural synthesis that Brother Gonzalo and Sister Teresa worked so carefully to preserve in their pioneering manuscripts. As the abbey bells ring out across the medieval landscape, calling scholarly communities to their evening prayers, we encounter the ultimate destination of our pilgrimage, the legendary Library of Eternal Wisdom, where all lost manuscripts ultimately find their true home. Here, in chambers that transcend the limitations of physical materials, the accumulated knowledge of centuries creates an atmosphere where parchment never fades, where gold leaf perpetually shines with divine light, and where every illuminated manuscript that has ever served the purposes of learning and beauty continues its educational mission in the timeless study hall that encompasses all authentic scholarship throughout human history. The vanished manuscripts we have encountered in our journey through medieval Europe are represented here not as lost treasures, but as books that have transcended their earthly limitations to join the eternal library, where knowledge and beauty, text and image, human creativity, and divine inspiration merge in the perfect harmony that authentic education ultimately seeks. And as the abbey bells ring out across both time and eternity, calling all seekers to the universal scriptorium that exists beyond the boundaries of any particular scholarly tradition, we understand that every manuscript that ever preserved wisdom, every illuminated book that ever combined learning with beauty, every text that ever guided readers toward deeper understanding participates in humanity's ongoing quest for knowledge and meaning that transcends all earthly limitations while remaining intimately present in every moment of genuine intellectual curiosity. The lost manuscripts we have encountered tonight represent not endings but transformations, their educational purpose preserved in the eternal library, where all authentic scholarship finds its ultimate fulfillment. Rest now, dear listener, knowing that every moment of learning you have ever experienced Every time you have been moved by the beauty of written words or artistic images, every instant when knowledge has illuminated your understanding connects you to the eternal manuscript that holds all human wisdom in its infinite pages. Sleep now, and let your dreams be filled with the gentle scratch of quills on parchment, the soft glow of gold leaf catching morning light, the peaceful satisfaction of scribes and artists creating beauty that will inspire future generations. In your dreams, you may find that every lost manuscript eventually finds its way to worthy readers. Every illuminated book continues to teach and inspire. Every work of scholarly art that time has claimed becomes part of the eternal library where all human learning finds its home. The medieval night embraces you now, complete and eternal, where every lost manuscript becomes a blessing, every vanished book becomes a prayer, every illuminated text that time has claimed becomes part of the infinite library that holds all humans seeking for knowledge and beauty, offering eternal wisdom to every soul that approaches with humble heart and genuine thirst for understanding.